Some time back, I joined a business organization that was a distributor of home and cosmetic products. With an MBA degree, I wanted to get a placement in a different kind of organization, and not in an agency, but I was advised to take up this job to get some early experience of what the field was like. I was only 28 years old when I joined the place. I was an extrovert and was kind of notorious for being too cheerful all the time. On the very first day, there was the usual intro session when I was introduced to the other staff members. There was a girl my age who introduced herself to me as Gabriella. She said and came close to stand by me. We took an instant liking for each other. She was several years younger than me and the only person from this office that I am still great friends with. The man introducing me was the manager and the person that I would directly work under. Let's call him John. I felt something was off with the way John was behaving towards me that day. It felt like he was annoyed that people were happy to see a new person join the team, which didn't make any sense. Shouldn't a boss be happy that a new worker was joining the force? It was a bit weird to say the least. The position that I had applied for mentioned the main role was sales strategy and marketing, but it had been a month since I started working here, and the only tasks that John assigned to me were things that could be done by an 8th grader. No offense to 8th graders. He essentially had me on the phone doing cold calls and writing emails. I felt like he was treating me more like a secretary than someone who was hired to help out with marketing strategy. When I would ask him about the nature of the work, his reply was along the lines of, "Communication and cold calls are the basics of marketing. I'm surprised you aren't aware of that, considering your education." You see, I had mentioned in my resume the college that I had graduated from. It was one of the top colleges in the state, probably in the top 10 or 15 in the country. John always seemed to be annoyed with this fact, and when he introduced me on the first day, one of the phrases he used was, "Katie mentioned in her resume that she graduated from college name. Well, looks like you all have some competition now." The way he said it was ever so slightly bitter, and I feel like some of my new colleagues were also set against me with that statement. Anyway, after another 2 months of this, it appeared that he finally wanted to give me some real work. John called me into his room, and as I entered, he decided that it was a good time to answer a phone call. He didn't have the courtesy to tell me to sit down, so I just stood there as he spoke for the next 5 minutes, curious to see when he would motion me to sit. He didn't. After he finished the call, he got right to the point and said that corporate wanted an assessment and recommendations to improve sales for a few of our underperforming outlets. It turns out we were at risk of going red if things didn't turn around soon. John gave me a file of the number of retail outlets across multiple different cities that were having issues. He said that many of these cities had experienced sales teams, but as their performance was poor, the managing director of our company was going to be coming in about a week to discuss the matter. He then proceeded to throw a curveball and said, "Why didn't you do anything about this before?" Wait, what? "You assigned me to make cold calls. A good employee never makes excuses, but rises to the task. You were hired for your skills with marketing, but you haven't contributed, have you? With all due respect, you prevent..." "That's enough. I don't want to hear any more excuses. When can you start doing your job?" I controlled my anger and replied in as calm-sounding a voice as I could muster, "I need a total account of sales over the last 6 months, the data from our stores that are performing well and the ones that aren't." There were a bunch of other sales retail details that I asked him for. "Well," he said, "you can take the help of Gabriella. She'll get you what you need." "All right, I'll have a report by the end of the week." It was 10 a.m. on a Monday when we had this conversation, and I immediately got to the task. I was so glad to be allowed to do the job that I almost forgot about how rude and manipulative he had been. Over the week, I was busy with Gabriella, who assisted me and ensured that I had the data and files I requested. During the data analysis, I discovered that in the outlets that had good sales, the common factor was much faster response time to customer inquiries and far more management from their social media handles. On the flip side, those outlets that were doing badly simply ignored several messages, and endless complaints were being made about the terrible customer support along with several negative reviews on the store's Google business listing. Many other factors contributed to the terrible sales. Still, it was a textbook case of poor management, and the only thing surprising was the fact that it was happening across multiple outlets. I pored over the data, trying to find some sort of correlation, but sometimes the simplest explanation is the correct one. The management in those cities was just bad. I knew my report would probably get several people fired or transferred, but that was just the way it is in sales. Anyway, I was tasked with finding the problem and helping fix sales, and as far as that, I was doing my job. I worked overtime every single day of that week and even drafted suggested marketing strategies that we could implement, even the well-performing outlets, to help boost already good numbers. I proofread it, slept on it, and then proofread it again, ironing out any possible errors, and sent the final report to John's email towards the end of Friday. I also decided to take Monday off as I was quite drained from the hectic work. The managing director was to arrive on Wednesday, and I wanted to be fresh and ready to answer any questions and needed rest. Over the weekend, I took things easy and I binge-watched the TV show Succession that Gabriella had been telling me about. The break was cathartic, and I couldn't wait to get back and do more of this sort of real work that I enjoyed. When I returned to the office on Tuesday, I noticed some of my colleagues making eye contact with me and then looking away. Sensing something was wrong, I asked Gabriella what was up, and I was in shock when I heard what she said. It turns out the managing director had decided to come early and already visited us on Monday, the day I had taken off. John had taken my presentation and spun it as if it was something that he had done, and acted like he had worked very hard over the week. It seems the MD was impressed by the report, but then asked about me and where I was and why I hadn't helped out since the marketing strategy was what I was supposed to be doing. John tried to destroy my reputation in front of the MD and said that I had been showing a lot of attitude and had been difficult to work with. He tried to spin my day off as unpredictable behavior. He said this in front of many senior colleagues who sadly didn't realize that I was the one who had been working on this report. Gabriella seemed to be the only one who knew, but she was an intern and shy. I was crushed that she didn't try to speak out for me, but then I realized if I was in her position and the youngest person in a room full of powerful men in their 50s, I might feel the same. John called me into his office and yelled at me for taking the day off, even though he had approved it himself. He said that he had tried reaching me, but the calls didn't connect. This was BS. I didn't get a single call or text from him that day. I also loved how he was trying to fake being outraged because he certainly enjoyed taking credit for my work. He didn't know that I knew, which was weird since he was aware that Gabriella and I were friends. I bit my tongue and promised myself that I would find a way to get back at John. I knew that there was no point in trying to prove that I was the one who did the work and wrote the report to the MD because they would naturally think that I was being petty. They might even side with John, saying that as I worked under him, he isn't under any obligation to credit every person he assigns work. Fair enough. But this utter disrespect and manipulation needed to end, and I knew I had to find an angle that would hit him where it mattered. I decided to do a little deep dive into his online presence and discovered something very interesting. On his Instagram page, I noticed that he followed one of our competitors, a particularly nasty one that had indirectly slandered our brand in their marketing, something like the sort of rivalry that Apple and Samsung have, but on a smaller scale and much pettier. I initially thought that maybe he wanted to just keep an eye on them, but I noticed that he liked a lot of their posts, which was a little strange. I decided to make a fake profile and struck up a conversation with him as a reply to a comment that he made somewhere else on Instagram. I made a lot of small talks, and eventually we sort of had a weird friendship where I would ask him about his day, and we would just talk about random crap. It was interesting to see how he was just as narcissistic in his personal life. He never once bothered to ask me about my day. Anyway, I slowly started to steer the conversation about work and tried to see if he was trying to steal company secrets to share with our competitors. But it wasn't anything like that. Turns out the guy legitimately liked and enjoyed buying their sunscreen. I knew I could find something else to use against him though, so over the days, I probed here and there and finally decided to ask him what his work life was like. Oh boy, I found gold. You see, John is quite an entitled person, and through this weird friendship, I came to know that he believes that he should have been promoted several times, and it should have been him that is the managing director of the company by now. I guess this pent up rage blinded him too much, and he even dropped our company's name in the chat as well as the name of our managing director, describing him in detail as gullible effing idiot. He proceeded to talk about how he had faked working on an important report a few days back and that his boss was so dumb he didn't even realize it. I asked him who was it that did it, and he replied, "Oh, some uptight girl from a fancy college that just joined us." Over the next few weeks, I collected a massive amount of horrid crap that he spouted. I gladly took screenshots after each message I received, and there were so many that I was even worried that the buttons would stop working. I did this just in case he had a moment of clarity and realized that talking about your boss and subordinates that way to a random stranger might not be the best idea. I spent several hours arranging the screenshots into a scrollable PDF and sent it to the managing director with a brief explanation. I didn't mention who I was, though, and sort of posed as an anonymous insider. The next morning, I arrived to see John looking like a lost puppy. All the arrogance and smugness had left his face. I got there just in time to see his phone ring for what was definitely not the first time that day. He runs to his office and shuts the door. Gabriella looks at me with a puzzled look, and I shrug. I later found out that they didn't even fire him. John resigned when he was shown the screenshots of his DMs. A week later, I got a call from MD who offers me John's now vacant position. I gladly accept and happily update my LinkedIn profile to reflect this. He's connected with me on there. A few days later, John sends me a message, furious and asking if it was me who had been chatting with him. I left him on read. Well, she's back. Was hoping she just wouldn't come back after she broke her foot, but last week we heard a door slam from upstairs. We looked outside and yep, her car was there. No idea if her nephew who was house sitting is there or not still. Anyway, a few days ago, I tested positive for the much whispered pathogen and have been doing the right thing and staying inside and dying quietly. I'm fully vaccinated, so it's not that bad. I could live without the headaches. My partner was away all day Saturday because he was picking up his new car and he got home late Saturday afternoon, parking his new car on the back lawn so he could give it a quick hose down from the drive. I was inside watching through the sliding door when I heard her balcony door open and she started yelling at him to get off her lawn. He told her to shove it. It's not her lawn, and he's done when he's done, and she can just please stop yelling because I have COVID and it doesn't help the migraines. Well, that was a mistake. I heard her storming down the stairs, and she starts banging on our door, screaming that I'm diseased and that I need to be isolated somewhere else before she gets sick, and if I don't leave, she was going to call the police. I told her, through the main door, that she had been told repeatedly that she can't kick us out of our own place that we own. I'm staying inside and that she could call the police if she wanted. She would more than likely be fined herself for wasting their time. According to my significant other, who was coming in after moving his car, she looked downright murderous, but once she saw him, she took off up the stairs. Haven't heard anything from her since, or anything from the police, so I think it was an empty threat. I was so tempted to open the door because, like they say, sharing is caring.